Yes, please come to standing. And just notice what we've been having all these investigations with the floor, right? The floor is sort of been a touching point, literally and figuratively, for us. So how does the floor come into you today? If you think of the floor coming through the bones of your legs and into your back and your neck and your head, are there places where you don't feel the presence of the floor? You might feel it very clearly in others, and then there's a gap. And maybe you experience the experience of the floor as being a sense of weightedness upon it. And then think about how you're feeling now, and how would you like to feel? What is a feeling that you would like to feel more of? Just for yourself. And then please come down onto your mat and lie on your back. And now that you're comfortably situated there, we've also been playing with the question of how would you roll if you were to roll to the right or roll to the left, barring the absence of a cat standing on your belly. If you were to roll to the right or to the left in a way that you needed to get up and out of the room quickly, not that we're going to do this, but just think, which direction would you do that in? Would you roll to the right? Would you roll to the left? And again, it may be entirely determined by your environment, because this is our story, right? We're always interacting with our environments. So you might only roll one direction because there's the door. So could you come to roll onto whichever side you would prefer? This lesson will focus, we'll spend a lot of time on the one side. Of course, you can always change if you need to for whatever personal reason. But come onto whichever side you would be comfortable on for a while. And we'll start in the position of the knees drawn up, the top knee resting on the bottom knee. The head can be cushioned on a pillow or a blanket or under your arm. And let's have the top arm, the arm closest to the ceiling, standing somewhere on the floor in front of you in a way that suggests support in a comfortable way. Just find where that spot is. And then begin to think about rolling towards your back just a little bit. And notice, what is the first thing that you do? What is the first thing you do? And do that several times. So you think about rolling to your back. You have the idea, and then you have the intention. And then where does that intention spread to? Where is it in relation to the floor? And what is the first thing that moves? And does that part of you use the floor? Are you aware of the floor? does the movement come from without, meaning more peripherally? Let's say, is it your arm or your hand pushing into the floor that starts to move you back, or is it something else? Maybe it's your pelvis that starts, or maybe it's your head turning that starts. And then pause with that, and bring your attention to your sternum, the long, flat bone that runs down your chest, that many of your ribs are attached to in the front. Actually, I think all of your ribs are attached to your sternum in the front, aren't they, Dillis? And then they go around, and then the last two floating ones, the last two floating ones on the bottom are not attached in the front. So just become aware of that breastbone, and have the breastbone be have your intention to turn a little bit towards the ceiling coming from the breastbone. So so not from the hand, although the breastbone might somehow issue some information about the movement through the hand into the floor. So are you turning in the direction of the ceiling with your breastbone? From the front of the breastbone? From the top of the breastbone? From the middle of it? Does the head begin to roll and the eyes to turn to the ceiling? So let's think of turning from the front of the breastbone. The front of the breastbone is the star, and turns you towards the ceiling a bit, turns the face towards the ceiling a bit, turns you a little more towards your back. And then the front of the sternum, what brings you back? Have the front of the sternum bring you back, as though it were being pulled by something. And then think about bringing your mind to the inside of the sternum. So rather than the front that you present to the world, the back of it, the part of the sternum that looks at your spine. And could you begin to roll towards your back just a wee bit from that place? So it's more of a drawing in and a backwards movement. And there's something about a softening happening in the sternum. And can you think of this movement, this long bone with all these ribs attached to it, as being very elastic? And that this movement that you're doing, that's coming from your sternum, assisted by your cat, can you move can you move so that you're the back of your sternum, behind your sternum, is drawing you a bit into a rounded position, and this roundedness creates a different relationship of your ribs to the floor. So the sternum is directing, it's the back of the sternum starting to direct you towards your back. And just play with this a little while longer, and follow through yourself where the movement feels responsive and elastic, and where it feels fixed. So as you go along in your mind through the chain of your spine, from the top of your head through the 7 cervical vertebrae, through your mid-back, in between your shoulder blades, and lower back behind your waist, as the back of your sternum draws you backwards and begins to roll you, pay attention to the quality of resiliency, elasticity, responsiveness to the floor and to your internal sensations of comfort, and where there might be places of fixation or rigidity. And pause for a moment. Just pause for a moment on your side there. And now can you think about moving your mind further behind you to the interior of your spine? That's the part that looks at your sternum. The part of your spine opposite your sternum, excuse me, opposite your sternum on the inside. So frequently we're asked to sense our spines, and can be relatively easy to find. You can feel the bony bones of your spine, sometimes on the floor. You can palpate them, but it's not often that we're asked to sense ourselves from the interior of the spine. So find that place that's opposite your sternum, all along there, several vertebrae, and begin to move backwards from the interior of your spine in a way that brings those vertebrae closer together and begins to soften and roll you. So here is where the intention comes from, to roll towards the back. And listen again for these qualities throughout yourself of responsiveness, connection to the floor, resiliency, elasticity, and fixation. And seek, I know you're already seeking this in yourselves, but actively seek more resiliency. So once you've located the places that may feel fixed, those might be places that feel painful. It might be the moment when you stop breathing. Locate where that is along the chain of your spine. See if you can invite it to soften. And continue this exploring of rolling a little towards the back and coming back onto the side, listening to how you use the floor. And can this rounding backwards, so think of the sternum be what's driving the front of the spine to close. Somehow the sternum can drive the front of the spine to close and the back to begin to round backwards. So let's take care of the head. As you continue exploring in your own timing and resting as you need to, could you begin to bow your head forward so that the action of rolling towards your back comes from a very flexed position, the primary curve of the baby. So let the sternum guide your chin in such a way that as you begin to soften and round the back backwards, the head begins to bow forwards and the chin to stay closer to your chest. The chin stays close to your chest. So maybe having the arm bent in a bent position rather than a straight position might encourage the head. Or on your blanket. And now listen to the pubic bone and the chin. And as you use your sternum, you soften your sternum and you draw backwards, and the sternum somehow causes the spine to round and the head to lower. There's also the action of the pubic bone coming closer to the chin. The front of the body closing rather than opening. The body closing rather than opening as you go towards the back. So perhaps the knees, perhaps the right knee can stay on the floor. Everyone's lying on their, or the underneath leg, whichever side you're lying on. If you're lying on your right side, your right knee can stay on the floor, but it can move. Your ribs can move. And you're rolling towards the back. Think of rather than rolling, think of rounding your back into the interior surface of a ball. So rather than rolling towards the back, think of how the sternum could direct your upper back, your mid back, your lower back towards the interior surface of a very round balloon. So you're not even coming onto your back. You're not even coming onto your back. You're just rounding. And let's get even more specific. Can you locate in your mind your sacrum? Or even with one of your hands, you can touch the flat, bony surface of your sacrum, the big bone, the back of the pelvis. And as you, even with your hand behind you, could you think of something inside of yourself, in the front of the sacrum, causing the sacrum to go backwards, causing the sacrum to move backwards, and the spine to start in the chain of the spine. The spine starts to round, and all the vertebrae begin to open. We're not coming onto the back. We're not coming onto the back. We're not coming onto the back. Think of a shrimp lying on its side. And think that every vertebra is going to open equally with a sense of elasticity backwards. And then you undo that in a way that's very elastic, as though your bones were rubbery and elastic, and that this movement, this drawing inwards and backwards, spreads through all of your joints. This elasticity, this responsiveness spreads like tendrils through your hip joints, into your knees and your ankles, into your shoulders and your elbows, through your neck. And coming back onto your side,
Alice, I'm
the same.
confused. are we curling forwards or backwards?
It depends on what you see from my side of the screen.
Arching?
No. Okay. So let's go back. Let's go back. So the idea behind this lesson is to find proportionate opening of all the vertebrae of the spine in an elastic way. So we're not concerned with rolling towards the back, onto the back. We're more like a cuttlefish. Have you seen them go through the water? Of course, they don't have any bones, but you're moving backwards using your sternum to create the feeling of opening. Okay, so you'll feel some places more than others. Now, where I wanted to focus was where we were just playing with the back of the pelvis, yeah? Back of the pelvis. That you can draw the spine backwards from the sacrum. It doesn't have to be yes, exactly. You can, and it can be from the back of the sacrum or from the interior of the sacrum. Yes. So it's more, this lesson is very internal. It's not about rolling onto the back. We will roll onto the back, but it's going to be quite different when we get there. So now we're just vertebra by vertebra playing with how can you draw the vertebrae back, and how can you use your sternum to soften the sacrum and move it backwards. Yes. And the head is bowing. And the pubic bone is coming towards the face. These are other cues. And the ribs underneath you somehow take hold of the floor and draw you back. They can use the floor, but it's not about rolling onto the back. It's drawing the spine backwards as though each of your spinal processes had a string attached to it, and they were all pulled equally in a way that fans out the spine into a circle. But we're specifically looking at different places. So, can you locate, maybe with your hand, the top of the back of your pelvis and your fifth lumbar vertebra? Good. Sorry for the interruption. Now, can you draw yourself backwards from the fourth lumbar vertebra, the one above it? And that can open relative to the one below it and the one above it. In a way that's elastic and through the rest of you. And can you open the fourth lumbar vertebra by doing something with the interior of your sternum? Would you spread that pressure that's going back into that imaginary balloon Pause. Now, the next lumbar vertebra, the third lumbar vertebra, is the one vertebra in your spine that is vertical when you are standing. I just learned this myself. So its shape is like a stump that's flat on the top and flat on the bottom, and the other vertebrae above and below it are not like that. They have a little bit of a curve. But the third lumbar vertebra is the one that lines up vertically to the ground when you're standing. So now think about moving that bone backwards. And this is the bone. This is where we get into the concept of the hara. The center, this bone, the one that lines up vertically. Can you move it backwards? Can you move it backwards? And the one below it is curling under, and the one above it is curling over. And your chin and your pubic bone, and your chest and your sternum, and the interior of your spine. You can move your mind around. Play with different points of initiation. And now can you continue playing with this and listen to the parts of your spine that feel like they could use a little more elasticity, maybe between the shoulder blades or behind the neck. And play with the sternum, the inside of the sternum, drawing back as a way of opening these places. And the head is bowing, the head is bowing. The vertebrae of the neck. Can you think of the seventh cervical, the bone of the neck that protrudes the most at the base of the neck, and move it backwards? You can even, with your free hand, you can touch all of this. You can put a finger pad on the next vertebrae, on the seventh cervical or on the sixth cervical. And one at a time, you can palpate. And how could you move backwards with those bones and start spreading them, and the head lowering, and the pubic bone coming towards the face, and the spine opening, and the sacrum going back. So you're curling into yourself like a nautilus shell. And no one part of you, it's not about coming onto the back. It's not coming onto the back. It's about rounding backwards as though to fill out the skin of a balloon. If someone were blowing up a balloon and you were a round balloon, it would round equally. A balloon doesn't sort of fill here and there. The air pushes evenly throughout. Could think of filling the interior of your spine with air, and listen with your fingertips behind the vertebra of your neck. You just send a little more intention there, and it can round accordingly. And now could you begin to roll? No, let me take that back. Once you have reached the full roundness of your spine, where you feel that all the vertebrae are open in the back and you're very, very closed in the front. You've touched all the spaces. When you're at the most closed place, can you begin to extend your top leg down? Begin to straighten your top leg down and feel what happens. So what starts to happen in your spine? What starts to happen through yourself? You go from being very rounded and very full in the back. And the top leg, it doesn't even need to hover in the air. It can stay on the floor. The knee can slide along the other leg and the foot can slide along the floor. And you might begin to feel the pelvis start to turn. And think that this lengthening leg can start to move you towards your back in such a way that you could reverse it and that you're using the floor through your back and your ribs and your waist. So you can easily return to your side, and at no point are you falling onto your back as you begin to lengthen the leg down. And you can come all the way onto your back by navigating the floor and navigating through the front of you is the control. The bottom knee can stay open and relax on the floor, and then you reach the full length of your long leg, and you keep lengthening it even more. And then how would you use this elasticity, this folding, the spine rounding, the floor, the ribs, the pelvis, to come back onto your side, curled up, safe and curled up. So play with this lengthening leg, slowly undoing. But feel, yes, good. You can feel the contact of all your ribs and the side of your back as you come on your back, and then the leg lengthens. You can pull it long and then draw yourself into yourself with no one part of yourself working harder than another at any given moment in time. So you go from very rounded and curled to very long and extended, back to very rounded and curled in an elastic, resilient, smooth. And now something interesting can happen with the top arm, the hand that has been resting on the floor. If you have room in your environment, the next time you begin to lengthen your leg, could you extend your arm in front of you long and then begin to sweep it in an arc overhead until the leg is long and the arm is long. And you've rolled into a very extended place, reaching through that side from the fingertips to the heel. And then how can you come back, reversing that? The arms sweeping in a circular arc overhead. You can trace the feeling of the fingertips, but the leg and the arm are being drawn there by your center. So you don't need to use the support of that arm or leg through the floor. It's all controlled through the intelligence and the resiliency and the timing and the breath of rounding into a ball. And listen to the roll, R-O-L-E, that your sternum plays. The sternum can drive the whole thing from the back of the occiput where the head joins the spine to the tip of the tail. What if you started it from the third lumbar vertebrae and spread above and below to your full length and then back into your most roundedness? Never a feeling of falling, never a feeling of abandoning yourself to gravity or giving in. And then could you somehow use this process to bring yourself onto the other side? So start transferring the knowledge of how the sternum and the spine and the neck and the pubic bone and the chin and the breath and the ribs and the floor can bring you into, this process brings you onto the other side, depending on your environment, of course. And then can you just spend a few minutes with yourself, exploring internally this beginning, this just the idea of the beginning of a roll that comes from a very rounded position, a drawing inwards, a drawing backwards. You can palpate with the free hand if you're not clear in certain places. Perhaps the back of the neck is fixed. Where are the places that are fixed? Where are the places that are resilient and elastic? So that when one part of you moves, the entire of you moves harmoniously, liquidly. Like you can pour yourself into the rounded space that you're creating in the cavity of your interior. Just pour yourself, fill yourself. And when it's completely full and there's nowhere for the fullness to go, you can only open. You can begin to extend the top leg and the top arm. And it's that extension. The action of the extension begins to roll you onto your back. But the front of you is keeping you from falling and lowers you. The floor, always your communication with the floor. So that you and the floor become one. This action of pouring yourself to your full length and then drawing yourself to the most short you can be in the front. So flexion and extension, most primitive movement, like a sea anemone, opening and closing in the water. Lovely, lovely to witness when everything is so harmoniously working together. and no doubt lovely to feel, to experience yourself in this way. Take a rest on your back. What does your interior feel like? Your relationship with your environment? Your sense of wholeness and unity within yourself? And then could you just once more draw yourself, bring one arm long, and roll towards that side, from that long side onto that side, into a very rounded. Feel the the reciprocity of your limbs, everybody being drawn in from the interior and then opening out and going to the other side. You have room in your space. Just passing through, just pouring yourself through like a liquid silver onto the other side. Everything harmoniously working together, the breath, the spine, weightless, effortless, from long to short, from short to long. And then at some point, without pausing, continuing in this elastic and responsive way up onto your feet. In this elastic way, from rolling from the back and rolling onto the side and drawing yourself up into the vertical and drawing yourself up to the place where the bones draw the floor into you. And feel your standing self. And is this a little closer to how you would like to feel yourself? Just a little closer. We asked at the beginning, how would you like to experience yourself? Is this a little more like you would like to experience yourself? And as you begin to move around, can you listen for this elastic quality that you have? And play with this idea that rather than you meeting the floor as you move about, it's the floor moving through you. It's the ground coming through you.